The $54 billion lawn and garden industry depends on you never learning what I am about to show you. Every year, the average American household spends $600 on seeds, soil amendments, pesticides, and fertilizers to grow a garden that produces a fraction of what they need. But 350,000 Amish gardeners across 32 states have been growing every vegetable their families eat entirely from their own land for over 200 years without a single purchased input. They have never bought a bag of fertilizer. They have never needed one. Number 25, open pollinated seed saving. Most gardeners buy new seed every spring because the catalog trained them to. An Amish gardener in Lancaster County selects the strongest producer from each bed at season's end and saves it forward, building a locally adapted variety that outperforms commercial stock on the same soil within 3 generations. The Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa has cataloged over 600 distinct Amish seed lines since 1975. Many hitting commercial yield levels in their home regions. Year 1 costs 1 packet. By year 5, the seed is free, better adapted than anything in the store, and the catalog never gets another dollar. The bed those seeds go into costs even less to prepare. Number 24, sheet mulching. Buying bagged topsoil to start a new garden bed is the kind of advice that makes the garden center profitable and the gardener dependent. In Kutztown, Pennsylvania, Amish gardeners have been laying cardboard flat on raw ground and covering it with compost and straw since before the Rodale Institute documented a 60% weed reduction on plots using this method in their 1970s trials. No tilling, no purchased topsoil, no equipment rental. The cardboard costs nothing, and the compost is already being made from kitchen scraps. One afternoon of layering replaces a season of maintenance. The biology working underneath that cardboard, though, is what actually drives the productivity, and feeding it requires nothing but the worms already in the ground. Number 23, earthworm population management. A conventional gardener spends $340 a season on synthetic nitrogen to compensate for biology that was destroyed by the last bag of synthetic nitrogen. Ohio State University Extension agents documented an Amish community in Holmes County in 2009 with earthworm densities 3 times higher than neighboring conventional gardens on identical soil. The Amish gardener spent nothing on fertility that year. 1 acre of that worm-worked ground moves and aerates more material per night than a tiller burning fuel for a full day. The worms are the fertility system, not a supplement to it. Feeding that population correctly requires heat, and the Amish composting method generates more of it than most people would believe possible from a pile of kitchen scraps. Number 22, thermal composting. Most compost piles rot slowly and spread weed seeds back into the garden. Samuel Graber of Shipshewana, Indiana, layered his carbon and nitrogen materials at deliberate ratios and watched the interior reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit within 4 days, killing every weed seed and pathogen in the pile. The Amish farm and house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, has demonstrated this exact layering method publicly since 1955. Finished amendment from that pile runs roughly $40 per cubic yard at garden center retail pricing. Graber's cost was table scraps and spent plant material. Every cubic yard his pile finished was $40 that never reached a supplier. Water management was the next piece the Amish locked down, and their answer to drought required no pump, no permit, and no power line. Number 21. Contour swale water harvesting. The summer of 2012 cut conventional farm yields across Lancaster County, Pennsylvania by an average of 40% in the mid-Atlantic drought. A 47-acre Amish operation on the same ridge lost nothing. No irrigation system, no emergency water delivery. Shallow trenches cut along the natural contour of the land slowed rainfall just long enough to push it into the root zone before it ran off the slope and disappeared. A storm drain moves water away from where crops need it as fast as physics allows. A swale does the opposite, and it costs 1 afternoon with a shovel. That stored water feeds the garden, but knowing exactly when to use it and when to leave it alone requires a skill that costs nothing and takes 10 minutes to learn. Number 20, finger test soil moisture reading. Consumer moisture meters fail in year 2 and cost $40. The USDA's 1936 Soil Management Field Guide recommended pushing 2 fingers 2 inches into the soil as more reliable than early mechanical meters for clay loam soils across the Mid-Atlantic region, and that recommendation has never been formally reversed. Jacob Byler of Mifflin County ran his entire market garden irrigation schedule off that diagnostic for 40 years without owning a single piece of moisture equipment. $0 spent, no battery, no calibration, no sensor corroding in wet soil. Reading moisture correctly prevents the overwatering that creates the pest pressure most gardeners then try to spray their way out of. The companion planting system that handles pest pressure from the inside out is older than any spray program, and it costs exactly 3 seed packets. Number 19, Three Sisters Companion Planting. 3 seed packets and 1 planting decision eliminate 3 separate line items from the garden budget simultaneously. Corn, beans, and squash planted together in a single Amish bed in Wisconsin were documented by the Oneida Nation Agricultural Program in 2017, confirming measurable nitrogen deposits from the beans, continuous ground cover from the squash leaves, and vertical climbing structure from the corn stalks, all without a single purchased input across the full trial. The Garden Center sells nitrogen fertilizer, weed barrier fabric, and plant cages as 3 separate products. The Three Sisters bed replaces all 3 with seeds. Total material cost for a 4 by 8 foot bed runs under $6. What arrives uninvited from outside that bed required a different system entirely, and the Amish version costs roughly $3 per season. Number 18, trap cropping. Most gardeners reach for a spray bottle when pest pressure arrives. A Chester County, Pennsylvania, Amish gardener planted a border row of blue Hubbard squash around his market beds in 2001, watched it fill with cucumber beetles over 2 weeks, then destroyed the row with the population inside it. The Rodell Institute documented this method across southeastern Pennsylvania Amish plots in 2003, measuring a 78% reduction in cucumber beetle pressure with 0 pesticide application. A conventional spray program on the same acreage ran an estimated $400 per season. The border row of sacrificial seed cost roughly $3. The Amish also built a permanent outer perimeter that handles pressure before it reaches the trap crop, and that structure was planted once and has never been replaced. Number 17, Hedgerow Planting. 4 miles of mixed native shrubs and trees border the Amish farm surveyed by University of Vermont researchers in Washington County, New York in 2011. Inside those hedgerow borders, aphid populations ran 34% lower than on open-edge plots in the same study area. The hedgerows harbored predatory insects that managed the pest population continuously without any intervention, slowed wind across the growing surface, and physically interrupted incoming migration before it reached the garden. 1 planting event, no annual cost, no spray schedule. A conventional grower managing the same pressure chemically spent an estimated $200 per season on the same acreage. The perimeter paid for itself in year 1. Inside that perimeter, the spacing system the Amish use doubles the output from every square foot, and Gene Logsdon measured it in Ohio 30 years ago. Number 16, French intensive bed spacing. Gene Logsdon spent 3 days measuring Amish kitchen gardens in Holmes County, Ohio in 1994 and published what he found in The Contrary Farmer. Same soil, same seed, same rainfall, double the yield per square foot compared to conventional row spacing on identical ground. Crops planted close enough that leaves touched at maturity, shaded the soil, held moisture underneath, and closed off weed germination with no additional labor after planting. A standard 20 by 40 foot bed managed this way produced what a conventional row garden needed 80 feet to match. Same seeds, same water, half the space, twice the food. What the ground produces in summer disappears by October without the storage system the Amish have been running since 1886 without a single utility bill. Number 15, root cellar storage. The Amish community in Geauga County, Ohio has used hand-dug root cellars continuously since first settlement in 1886. Earth holds temperature the way a vacuum flask holds heat. Not perfectly, but consistently enough that a properly dug cellar stays between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round with no electricity, no refrigerant, and no monthly bill. A family storing correctly in a root cellar eliminates the grocery produce budget for 4 to 6 months of the year entirely. 6 months of purchased produce for a family of 4 runs an estimated $600 to $900 depending on region. The cellar cost 1 weekend of digging. The front end of the season needed a different solution, and the Amish version of that cost under $200 in materials and went up in a weekend. Number 14, hoop house season extension. Bent electrical conduit and greenhouse plastic, that is the complete material list. An Amish grower in Elkhart County, Indiana was producing lettuce in February using this structure through the mid-1980s, a design the National Sustainable Agriculture Information Service formally documented in 2001, after it had been circulating through Amish communities for nearly 2 decades. 8 to 12 additional weeks of growing on both ends of the calendar. At current grocery prices, that extension eliminates an estimated $300 to $500 in annual produce spending from the household budget, for a total build cost under $200. The season extended in both directions for less than the average American spends on 2 grocery runs. The Foliar feeding system the Amish use inside that extended season requires no purchased product and is brewed from weeds. Number 13, fermented plant extract foliar feeding. Nettles and comfrey steeped in a bucket of water for 2 weeks produce a fermented liquid feed that delivers soluble nutrients directly to plant leaves without a single purchased input. Rodale Institute researchers in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, published findings in 2007 documenting Amish foliar preparations achieving nutrient uptake responses in test crops comparable to diluted commercial liquid fertilizer at 0 material cost. The weeds used as raw material were growing on the property regardless. The bucket was already there. The 2 weeks of fermentation required no attention. A commercial liquid fertilizer program on the same scale would run an estimated $80 to $120 per season. The Amish cost was nothing. The system that locks those nutrients into the soil permanently once they arrive requires one additional step and lasts for decades. Number 12, biochar soil amendment. Most soil amendments wash out of the root zone within 1 to 3 seasons and require reapplication. The International Biochar Initiative documented traditional biochar use in Pennsylvania Amish communities in a 2010 report, noting continuous application since the 19th century on soils still showing measurably elevated carbon levels a century later. Amish gardeners produce biochar by smothering wood fires before they ash out completely, incorporating the partially burned carbon material into beds where it holds nutrients and moisture against leaching indefinitely. One application, made correctly, is still working 100 years later. A commercial soil carbon amendment program on comparable acreage runs an estimated $150 to $200 per season. The Amish cost was a smothered fire. The timing of what goes into that soil is governed by a calendar the Swiss spent 10 years confirming. Number 11, lunar planting calendar. Root crops planted during the descending moon phase germinate faster and produce denser roots than the same variety planted 2 weeks earlier on a random calendar date. The Research Institute of Organic Agriculture in Frick, Switzerland completed a 10-year trial ending in 2012, finding statistically significant yield differences in potato and carrot crops planted on lunar timing versus randomized control plots on the same soil. Amish gardeners in Pennsylvania have aligned planting schedules to lunar cycles since before the American Revolution, not as tradition, but as yield management. The calendar costs nothing. It has been running longer than any seed company has existed. Reading the soil that receives those seeds requires a diagnostic the USDA started teaching formally in 2015, roughly 200 years after the Amish were already doing it. Number 10, biological soil assessment by hand. A standard laboratory soil test costs $25 to $40 and returns results in 2 weeks. An Amish gardener in Wayne County, Ohio presses a handful of soil, smells it, checks its color, counts the earthworms visible at 6 inches, and looks for fungal threads before making any planting or amendment decision. The USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service began formally promoting this sensory assessment through the Haney soil health methodology in 2015, decades after Amish communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio were already operating on its observational equivalent. The hand diagnostic takes 30 seconds. It costs nothing. And the water that feeds the garden those hands are reading comes from the kitchen twice before it reaches the root zone. Number 9, gray water recycling to garden irrigation. Vegetable washing water, kitchen rinse water, and laundry water from biodegradable soap contains exactly the dilute nutrients a garden needs and costs the municipal system system nothing to process if it never reaches the municipal system. A Daviess County, Indiana Amish community documented by USDA Rural Development in 2003 maintained productive gardens through a dry summer on gray water alone, with zero municipal water connection across more than 200 households. A municipal water bill for garden irrigation in that county ran an estimated $180 to $240 annually for comparable usage. The Amish households paid nothing because the water was already in the house doing a first job before it went to the garden to do a second. Below the surface of that garden, a population of organisms was eliminating an entire category of pest damage without any intervention. Number 8, beneficial nematode cultivation through no-till management. Tilling destroys the undisturbed soil structure that predatory nematodes require to function. A 2005 Cornell University study in Ithaca, New York, documented Amish garden plots in the surrounding region with beneficial nematode densities 4 times higher than tilled conventional gardens on comparable soil types, with significantly lower grub and wireworm damage across the Amish plots. The Amish gardeners had not introduced those nematodes. They had simply never destroyed the habitat. A commercial beneficial nematode application for a standard home garden runs $30 to $60 per treatment and requires reapplication after each tillage event. The Amish cost was zero, sustained by the decision to leave the soil structure intact. The wood from the stove that heats the house in winter produces an amendment that handles 3 separate garden problems simultaneously. Number 7, wood ash application. Wood ash from household stoves raises soil pH in acidic beds, adds soluble potassium, and creates a physical barrier that slugs will not cross. Penn State Extension published a soil amendment comparison in 2009 documenting wood ash application on Pennsylvania Amish gardens achieving pH correction equivalent to purchased agricultural lime at zero cost, using material the household was producing regardless of whether the garden existed. A purchased agricultural lime application for a standard 1,000 square foot garden runs an estimated $15 to $25 per season. The Amish cost was the effort of moving ash from the stove to the bed. 3 separate purchase products replaced by 1 byproduct. The nitrogen picture required a different approach, and the Amish built it into the rotation itself rather than buying it by the bag. Number 6, green manure cover cropping. A Lancaster County, Pennsylvania Amish operation, documented by the Rodale Institute in 2005, maintained a nitrogen-positive soil balance across a 7-crop rotation over a full decade without purchasing a single nitrogen input. The mechanism was legume cover cropping between main crops, clover, vetch, and field peas, slashed back into the beds before planting to release fixed atmospheric nitrogen directly into the root zone. A commercial nitrogen program on the same scale runs an estimated $80 to $120 per season. The rotation ran at zero nitrogen cost for 10 consecutive years. The same material that builds nitrogen in summer can be captured for winter production in a structure built from what most people throw away. Number 5, cold frame construction from salvage materials. Mother Earth News documented an Amish market gardener in Wayne County, Ohio in 2001 harvesting spinach and kale through January using cold frames built entirely from reclaimed window glass and rough-cut lumber at an estimated construction cost of $12 per frame. A commercial cold frame kit runs $80 to $150. The Amish version outperformed it on the same soil in the same winter at 1/10 the cost, because the glass was already available and the lumber came from a sawmill cutoff pile. 15 degrees of temperature protection from $12 in salvage material. The protein supply needed an equivalent winter solution, and an $8 jar of sodium silicate solved it for 6 months. Number 4, water glass egg preservation. An $8 jar of sodium silicate dissolved in water creates a preservation solution that keeps fresh eggs edible at room temperature for 6 to 12 months by sealing the shell's pore structure against air and bacteria. A Mifflin County, Pennsylvania Amish household documented in a 2003 Countryside magazine profile stored 18 dozen eggs from peak summer laying through the following winter using 1 jar of water glass, eliminating egg purchasing from October through April entirely. 18 dozen eggs at current retail pricing runs approximately $54. The preservation cost was $8. The cooking fat supply required a completely different solution, and the Amish built a press to produce it from a 1/4 acre of sunflowers. Number 3. Cold-press seed oil extraction. A 1/4 acre of sunflowers and a hand-built wooden screw press produced 14 gallons of cooking oil annually for a Geauga County, Ohio Amish family profiled by the Small Farm Journal in 1999. The press was built from salvaged hardwood. The sunflowers were a garden crop. The 14 gallons replaced an estimated $84 in annual cooking oil purchases, with zero recurring cost after the press was built. A commercial oil press runs $300 to $600. The Amish press cost the price of the wood and the afternoon it took to assemble it. Cooking fat from the garden closed one household input line. The medicinal garden closed another one, and the Ohio State Survey put a number on exactly how much. Number 2, medicinal herb garden. Ohio State University researchers surveyed 40 households in Holmes County, Ohio in 2006 and found over-the-counter medication purchasing running 74% lower in Amish households than in comparable non-Amish households in the same county. The difference was perennial plantings of echinacea, elderberry, yarrow, plantain, and comfrey maintained alongside the food garden, producing treatments for common infections, wounds, fevers, and digestive conditions without a pharmacy visit. A standard American household spends an estimated $339 annually on over-the-counter medications. A 74% reduction brings that to $88. The plants that account for that gap are perennials that replant themselves. The single practice that makes every item on this list possible is not a technique at all. It is a structural decision that closes the loop around everything else. Number 1, the closed loop garden. David Klein farmed 120 acres in Fredericksburg, Ohio, and described his household in his 1990 book, Great Possessions, as one that feeds itself before it feeds anyone else. The garden produces the seed. The seed produces the harvest. The harvest feeds the household. The household waste feeds the compost. The compost feeds the soil. The soil grows the seed again. Every output becomes the next input, and the purchase points disappear one by one until nothing on this list requires a trip to a store. The $54 billion industry does not fear a gardener who saves seed or builds a cold frame. What it cannot price its way into is a garden where the loop is closed, because a closed loop has no entry point for a vendor. You do not need all 25 to start. Save seed from one plant this season. Feed its spent material back into the soil. The connection between those two actions is the first link in a chain that 350,000 Amish gardeners have been running without interruption for over 200 years. The rest of the system becomes obvious once the first link holds. That is still how it starts. That is still all it takes.